throughout human history, across continents separated by vast oceans and civilizations that never knew of each other's existence, one story has emerged time and again with remarkable consistency. It is the tale of death followed by resurrection, of destruction leading to renewal, of the phoenix rising from its own ashes. From the ancient temples of Egypt to the sacred texts of Christianity, from Norse mythology to Hindu philosophy, the concept of rebirth appears as a fundamental thread woven into the fabric of human consciousness. This universal presence of rebirth myths raises a profound question. Why do cultures across the globe, independent of one another, consistently return to this powerful narrative of death and renewal? The phoenix itself, that magnificent bird of legend, serves as perhaps the most recognizable symbol of this eternal cycle. In Greek mythology, this solitary creature lived for 500 years before building a nest of aromatic wood and spices. As the sun reached its peak, the phoenix would burst into flames, only to emerge 3 days later as a young bird, reborn from its own ashes. Yet this is merely one version of a story that echoes across cultures with stunning similarity. In ancient Egypt, the Bennu bird served a similar role, associated with the sun god Ra and the flooding of the Nile. The Egyptians understood that life depended on cycles of death and rebirth, witnessing it annually as the great river's floods brought both destruction and fertile renewal to their lands. Their mythology reflected this natural truth through the Bennu, which died and was reborn in an endless cycle of renewal. The concept extends far beyond birds of flame. In Norse mythology, Ragnarok describes the twilight of the gods, a cosmic catastrophe that destroys the existing world order. Yet this apocalypse is not an ending, but a transformation, as a new world emerges from the ashes of the old, populated by surviving gods and 2 human beings who will repopulate the earth. The very name suggests not finality, but transition, a necessary destruction that precedes creation. Hinduism presents perhaps the most elaborate framework for understanding rebirth through the concept of samsara, the continuous cycle of death and reincarnation. Here, death is not an end but a transformation, as souls journey through multiple lifetimes, each death serving as a doorway to new existence. The religion's cyclical view of time itself reflects this principle, with the universe undergoing endless cycles of creation, preservation, and destruction. Christianity, while often viewed as linear in its theology, nonetheless centers on the ultimate rebirth story, the death and resurrection of Christ. This narrative of sacrifice leading to renewal, of death conquered by life, resonates so powerfully that it has shaped Western civilization for 2 millennia. The symbolism extends throughout Christian tradition, from baptism representing spiritual death and rebirth to the liturgical calendar marking cycles of death and renewal. Even in cultures where formal religion plays a smaller role, rebirth narratives persist. Japanese culture speaks of the cherry blossom, beautiful in its brief bloom and meaningful in its inevitable fall, representing the cycle of life, death, and renewal. Native American traditions across diverse tribes consistently feature stories of seasonal death and rebirth, often personified through corn gods or other agricultural deities who must die for life to continue. The prevalence of these myths suggests they fulfill fundamental psychological and social needs. On the most basic level, rebirth stories provide comfort in the face of mortality, offering hope that death is not absolute termination, but transformation. They acknowledge the reality of loss, while promising that loss can lead to something greater. These narratives also serve as frameworks for understanding natural cycles that govern human existence. Agricultural societies learned that fields must lie fallow to remain fertile, that seeds must be buried in apparent death before they can sprout into life. Seasons demonstrated the same principle on a grand scale, with winter's death preceding spring's renewal. Rebirth myths provided meaning for these observable patterns, transforming natural cycles into spiritual truths. Psychologically, rebirth stories offer templates for personal transformation. They suggest that individuals can overcome failure, trauma, or limitation through symbolic death and renewal. This principle underlies modern concepts of personal growth, career changes, and recovery from addiction, all of which involve abandoning old patterns to embrace new possibilities. The universality of rebirth myths reveals something essential about human nature. Our deep understanding that growth requires destruction, that creation emerges from chaos, and that the most profound changes often require symbolic death of what came before. These stories persist because they speak to truths that transcend cultural boundaries, addressing fundamental aspects of existence that all humans share. In recognizing these patterns across cultures, we discover not just interesting similarities, but profound insights into the human condition. The phoenix rises not because ancient peoples shared stories, but because they shared experiences of loss, hope, and the eternal human capacity for renewal.